Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 and Dakota Nations territory in the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Neil Harden. I'm chairing today's meeting. With me to my immediate left is Doug Marks, and via Zoom is Marla Billinghurst. The sessions today are, first of all, Marina Tenuara, and then Roddy Pontanilla. And the recording secretary today is Belton Rojo. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment role in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we'll limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are in sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of property do not consider evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by council and is independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information how to do so will be included with the board order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application is being brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and be part of the public record. So can you do the swearing in? It's going.
Madam Assessor, please state your full name.
Marina Gantika Tenora.
And you affirm the evidence you represent is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
Carrie Primer.
And you affirm the evidence you represent is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, we will be starting with item 2 on their agenda, 450 Portage Avenue. So you can proceed, Madam Assessor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. File number 21318. Applicant Altus Group Limited. Roll number 120915325500. Property address 450 Portage Avenue. Property owner Hudson Beef Company. This property was assessed for 2022 $10,722,000. That's the original value. And this is the old building. Everyone would know about what's the building and where it was. And also currently it is fully vacant and closed for the business. This property original built in 1927. We get a chance to inspect the property fully couple of weeks ago. Thank you so much for Mr. Reimer to organizing the inspections. We did inspect the property. It's fully vacant, but they're running all the necessary electricity, heating, and those ones. But other than it's fully vacant. And this property originally for 2020 assessment year, roll year, we did the revision by agreement with the Altus Group for the value. This is the value we set by the revision by agreement. My recommendation is to maintain the value as it is, 10,722,000. Sorry, 10,722,000. Simply, you can see the Google images. I assume everyone would know about where the property and what's the property. It's fully closed. I did not put any photos inside, but it's fully vacant. Nothing in there. My rent comparables in my page number 4. Those are comparables I just put, but none of them are really compared to this building because it's a size factor. Page number 5 is our how we calculate the original valuation. That's how we decide make a revision by agreement. That's the exact same thing showing here because that's the value we in the system right now. It's a warehouse. It's a very big warehouse space, 5,182 square feet, used by $5.29, and the storage mezzanine we use $3.98. Those are model-driven rents, and even it was occupied at the time 2020. We use fully we assume this building was in the fully vacant condition. That's why we gave the 25% vacancy because of the historical factors and the special situation with the building. At that time also we anticipate the business will close anytime soon. That's why we decided to give 25% vacancy. The 10,722 based on fully vacant condition to the building. It's 25% vacant, and also we use the highest cap rate we could use for this area because of the risk factor and all the other historical factors, because it's really hard to do again for the building business, come back to business based on so many other factors. We use the highest cap rate. I assume me and Mr. Reimer both are in the same page for the cap rate and the vacancy elements. But the rental rates, we are higher a little bit, but we use the lowest we could use for those spaces to calculate the 10,722. And also, this is the side factor. There was a publicly published appraisal report. It's showing the value is somewhat similar to our valuation, but we don't have any authorization to put the papers into our briefs or anything. But just anyone would like to search, you can search it up online. It's a publicly published appraisal report. So that's my presentation. It's fully vacant, and we consider the vacancy, and we use the highest cap rate, and we negotiate for 2020. And so my request to confirm the value as it is. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Reimer, do you have questions?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Tenuera, so Mr. Chairman, just for clarity, what I'll be doing when I'm both with my questions and my materials, when I refer to a page number, it's going to be the page number on the Adobe file itself. So in that context, page 1 would be the cover page, and then so on, as opposed to the page numbers in the briefs. So Ms. Tenuera, on page 5 then of your brief, which is the city's valuation for the subject, if I could ask you to turn there briefly. So the Mr. Chairman, I can frame the issues. Ms. Tenuera has put the issues very succinctly. The issue in this case really is the rental rate that is under examination. I'll have some ancillary comments about the appraisal and the reason we're back here today, but that is the crux of the issues here. So Ms. Tenuera, the second entry in that's premise ID 25173, 117,000 feet at 398, that's the basement space, correct?
Yes, because we have the label for basement storage mezzanine. Yeah.
Okay. So that was my understanding as well. That's the basement space. So And you were very fair in your comments. If we go one page up to page 4, the rent comparables, for the first 5, those, based on my research, those are fully finished office spaces, correct?
Yes, those are offices.
And for the retail warehouse comparables, again, those are fully finished retail spaces, a couple of Walmarts and similar premises, correct?
Yeah, those, none of them are 100% compare, but those are the biggest spaces we could use just
Right.
for putting.
And with respect to the retail, though, all of those comparables, just to be clear, those are all single story. Those are the Canadian
Yes,
Tire, the Walmart.
You are
that's all
exactly
one.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't have 100% comparable properties for the Hudson Bay downtown.
Right.
We don't have comparables.
Right. And again, appreciate you're very forthright with that, because what we've got in our situation here, we talked about the basement, but then we've got 6 floors, a 6-floor footprint with that's about 90,000 feet, and then 6 floors of space in this subject, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now recall, and I've got some photos, Mr. Chairman, we'll get to a little bit later, but recall, Ms. Tinoera, we of course inspected the property, and can we agree that the property would require a significant amount of work in order to make it suitable and appropriate for a new tenancy, whether that tenant might be retail or office or a mix of both?
Probably the floors Hudson Bay haven't used for the recently retail use. Yes, there is a huge renovation needs to be done, but the floors just closed down. It could be the small renovations, but it needs substantial renovation.
Right. And I would agree with that. And thank you again for being very forthright on that. So you had mentioned, the last question I had is you had mentioned the publicly available appraisal report. Now, in that report, and you talked about a similar value and such, that I guess first and foremost, very quickly, that's post-reference. We can agree on that, correct?
Yes, it's post-reference.
Right. And
that's why we don't have a permission, and I did not put anything, but it's a public evidence, but that's why anyone can search it up.
Sure. Now, but to be clear, if they were to search it up and find a value that, as you state, is comparable to yours, but were you aware, and I don't know if you've read the appraisal, were you aware that in order to get to that value, the assumption that was made was that between $90 and $110 million would be spent on the building to get it to that stage?
Honestly, I cannot comment on anything because it's post-reference, and I'm not going to talk anything.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Doug, any questions?
No questions this week. Thank you.
Marla, any questions?
No questions right now.
Okay, I got one question of the assessor. If you say it's the previous value was by agreement, was that a 15-1 agreement?
Yes, that's revision by agreement. Yes.
Okay. But you didn't put that signed agreement into the...
We usually don't put any signed agreement with our briefs, but because we signed it 2020, we set our system to show the numbers how we agreed to the value. My income expenses calculation exact how we agreed to the value, but we don't put the both signature pages into as our principal. We usually don't put the 15-1 agreement to the briefs.
Okay, thank you. I have no more questions, so you can proceed, Mr. Raymond.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And to that point, I want to thank Ms. Tinoera for, we've had this, I guess, ongoing discussion with the department about the use of 15-1s in subsequent hearings and such. And we've certainly suggested that those agreements, first and foremost, shouldn't be used as evidence of value for a different hearing, but even going further than that, because of the potential prejudicial value that we're not generally disclosing them at all, But I will be very clear. I want to be very upfront with this. Ms. Tinoera's comments are exactly right, and I will certainly have some comments for the board. We did, in fact, sign the 15-1 agreement for the 2020 assessment year at the 10,722,000. That is absolutely correct. So I want to be, again, very, very candid with the board on it. But I have some comments and I have some suggestions for this board as to why we're back here this morning. So if we could briefly turn to page 2, the request this morning is to reduce the 2022 assessment now of the subject from 10,722,000 to 7,052,000. This is, of course, the downtown Hudson Bay building, a 6-story structure with basement, constructed in, I believe, 1925, and is also, of course, the subject of a historical building designation, which certainly has an impact on the potential use or redevelopment or retooling of the building in the future. So then going to page 4, please, under property description. I'll just go through this very briefly. Subjects, of course, the previous, it's historically the department store formerly occupied by the Bay. It's a 6-story structure, and I stand corrected. It was originally constructed in 1927, has a building area of 635,659 square feet, including 117,000 square foot basement and then a further sub-basement. The plan area is 93,457 square feet, and the total area is shown as we've discussed is just over 635,000 feet. A couple of things have happened though. The Bay physically, and Ms. Tinoera alluded to this, that the Bay has in fact shut down all operations and the property has been 100% vacant since November of 2020. That closure, while it was expected, was actually accelerated in part, of course, due to the pandemic. But the property was well over 50% vacant leading up to the reference date. And certainly that would, in our opinion, justify the 25% that's been applied by both the department and ourselves in this case. So moving on to page 5, I mentioned there's some estimates to convert the space to use as offices. It'd be a minimum of $8 million per floor. Third-party estimates are between 92 for a single occupant and over 111 million for a multi-tenant. So we're not talking about renovations on a massive scale in order to make the property even viable for a different use. Despite many attempts over the years to find tenants, no tenancies would of course be secured or were secured as of the reference date. The floor plate doesn't allow for the required fenestration for most other uses, and only approximately 30 feet from the windows would benefit from the natural light coming in, leaving the majority of the floor plate dependent on artificial light. Current design and environmental standards allow maximum depths of 15 meters, while the building is 70 meters wide and 120 long. So it's a very, very difficult configuration for the redevelopment. We also note that the separate leasing of upper or lower floors while occupying the main is impossible due to the access for the other floors being in the middle of the main floor. So we've got, of course, a building here that we're suggesting is too large to occupy and too costly to convert. And then subsequent, in March of 2019, and I'm suggesting, Mr. Chairman, this goes to physical condition or legal use assumptions. And the legal use changed when, for the subject, when in March of 19, the property was added to the list of historical resources over the objections actually of our client. I talked earlier about the 15-1 that was signed and a couple of things that had arisen since the agreement was signed. And I draw attention to that here towards the bottom of page 5. As mentioned, we did sign the agreement with respect to the 2020 appeal at a value of $10,722,000, but there were two fundamental assumptions that this agreement was using when we signed it. The length of the agreement, of course, at that time was 2 years, based on the 2-year cycle as it then was, and the Bay at that time was also still an occupancy of 170,000 feet in the building, and it was on the assumption that that occupancy would continue for the majority of the assessment cycle as it then was. And recall, the province unilaterally in June of last year extended the assessment cycle for a full year. None of that was known, and certainly if that, what we're suggesting, Mr. Chairman, is if those circumstances were known, A, the early closure, but B, the early closure within the context of a much longer assessment cycle, that would have had a direct bearing on the discussions with respect to the 15-1. And it's for those reasons that we've been instructed to appeal the 2022 assessment of the subject, and we're asking the board to consider our submissions in that context. Mr. Chairman, if you recall Motor Coach, and I haven't submitted it, but recall that Motor Coach, the Court of Appeal in Motor Coach confirmed that the taxpayer does have the annual right to appeal. And while the board can consider the previous board order, or in this case, the 15-1 as prima facie evidence of value, the board is, of course, expected to consider all of the evidence supplied and presented by the appellant in the subsequent hearing. And that's what I'm asking this panel to do this morning in the context of those factors. So, Mr. Chairman, if we could move to page, I'll go briefly to page 11, please. And the crux of the issue, as I had mentioned, there's actually two issues. One of them is going to be common to all of the
Which is
appeals.
your page 11?
Yes, page 11. At the top of page 11, it's the valuation summary.
Okay, because the pages aren't numbered here.
Oh, like I'm on page 11 of the PDF document itself, hopefully, or are your page numbers different?
Different, yeah.
Yeah, they're different, yeah.
Okay, so it's the, wonder why that is. It's the page with the valuation summary on top. Can you confirm what page number you've got on that?
It's just our agenda gets submitted differently.
I think it's page, if I'm correct, it says page 31 of 289.
Yes.
Okay. You know what? Then I hadn't realized there was a difference there. So yeah, it's the page 11 with the valuation summary on the top, and of course showing our valuation of the subject. So the most significant difference in the valuation of the property relates to the rent that's been applied. What we have applied, Mr. Chairman, is that we've taken what was formerly occupied by the Bay and applied a $4 rent. That being, of course, including the main floor as well as an upper floor. So we've applied a slightly higher rent to reflect the fact that part of this is main floor space. Then for the remainder of the upper floor space, we've applied a rent of $350, and for the basement, we've applied a rent of $343. And we come in at a total potential rent of $2.3 million. Then running through as a vacancy allowance, we also are applying 25% for the reasons that we've talked about. We're actually using a lower shortfall rate, and this is predicated on the fact that the building as it is going to have reduced operating costs while it's in this condition. So we've actually used a lower rate for shortfall. We have used the 5%, what's known as the management expense, what is colloquially known as the management expense, and is in fact the non-recoverable expenses. And then running that through with the capitalization rate at 9.25, we come in at $7,051,000. So on the 2 pages, and I'm just going to refer now to this within the brief, the 2 pages above or 2 pages prior to the valuation page, we have under potential market income, we've listed 2 rents there. There's a rent for the Bay at St. Vital Center and at Polo Park. And as you can see on that page, the rents range from $1.74 to $2.25 a square foot. Very, very low rents. Now, granted, with the Bay at St. Vital, it's an older lease, but it's also based on a step up in November of 2009. But the Bay certainly is especially when you look at the condition of the subject, we believe that in that context, the rents that we're applying are very, very fair. So what I would propose to do, I'll talk about the non-recoverable expenses shortly, and I believe the board members are very familiar with that study, but I do want to, now again, this is going to be a reference to my page number on my PDF file, but I'll tell you what, about 6 pages after the valuation summary that I've just presented, our valuation, at my page 17 of the brief, there's a whole series of photos. It starts at my page 17 and actually continues for a total of is actually 25 pages of photos throughout all the floors, not the basement, but throughout all the floors of the subject. And Mr. Chairman, I mentioned the physical condition and the fact that I've suggested that the actually none of the comparables that either I've presented or Ms. Tina Wera in any way reflect or are in any way really comparable to the subject, given the condition that it's in and the work that would be required in order to make it suitable for leasing. But again, just to give the board a sense of the physical condition with those photos, this property as it stands today, in the physical condition that it's in today, is more akin to a storage type use more than anything else. And certainly our rents reflect that physical condition, and we're asking the board to consider that those rents accordingly. So that, with respect to the valuation, would be my comments. Now, I do have the non-recovered expense study that I have filed for the purpose of this hearing and the remainder of the hearings on this docket. So, Mr. Chairman, can you let me know when you have that study then in front of you?
We don't have it as yet. That's in your rebuttal?
No, it's not rebuttal. It's actually the non-recoverable expense study that I filed with the board for the purposes of all of the properties on this docket.
Which I forgot to include. Sorry, one second.
We'll get it.
Okay.
It's the
They're in the main folder.
in the main folder now.
Wait, is that the expense study?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I have very little labels. Okay, got it.
We have it now, yes.
There we go.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So I always preface my comments with respect to this study, because I know most of the members of the board have heard this repeatedly. Mr. Chairman, I'd ask the board, would you like me to take a very high level sort of review of it because you're very familiar with it, or is the board's preference to go into some detail? I'll be guided by you that way.
I think we've heard this numerous times. Just give us the
higher level. Okay, perfect. So if I could ask the board, actually, you don't even need to turn the pages. I'll just highlight the segments that I believe are germane. So what we say in our study is that this quote unquote management expense, what it is not, it's not an expense relating to the standard management fees that are charged by the owner or a third party manager relating to the day-to-day operations. Those, and there's never been a dispute about this, not ever. We are very upfront in saying those management fees are usually recovered from, in whole or in part, from the tenants, unless the tenants, of course, are in gross or semi-gross leases. But this is the key point. What that expense allowance has always intended to be in our respectful submission is a stabilized expense relating to a number of typical non-recoverable expenses that are associated with the proper and competent operation of the property. Those expenses are virtually never recovered from tenants under any circumstances, even where they're under net leases. There's a short quotation that we have pulled from some of the original valuation materials of the assessor. This is going back 25 years. And what they said under the management expense is that even with net leases and competent management, there'll still be expenses incurred by the landlord that are non-recoverable from the tenants. Examples of these are processing payments and chasing bad debts. And so those are two examples, but the fundamental point being, even where you've got these net leases, there's going to be non-recoverable expenses. And that is precisely our suggestion in this case, that the 5% allowance should be restored and should continue to apply due to these non-recoverable expenses. So when in our materials, then we of course present a chart. And if the board does want to look at the chart, it is on page 12 of the report. And there's a chart that talks about, that sets forth the non-recoverable expenses. The first column that's there is without any reference to any tenant improvements or inducements. And then a second column just for the board's reference that has the TIs included, and as to be expected, that percentage is substantially higher. But leaving aside TIs, so without any TIs, our study was based upon primarily four categories of non-recoverable expenses, leasing commissions, professional fees, in some cases asset management fees, though they're not very common, and then advertising or marketing. Of those, the leasing commissions and professional fees typically make up the lion's share of the non-recoverables, but of course they can come up under a number of different categories. But using those four fundamental categories, as shown on the chart, our average non-recoverable expenses stabilized through the research that we had done was 7.42%, and the median was 5.75%. So we're certainly suggesting in that context that the 5% allowance in this case is very fair and should be restored. And if you think about it, Mr. Chairman, of course, one thing that's become very obvious through the years is that the owner of the property is not going to be in a position to conduct the redevelopment and leasing of this building without a substantial degree of help and actually reliance on a commercial broker. So any commercial broker that's out there, of course, they are working on the basis of leasing commissions. That's how they make their living. And certainly that would be a factor and would again support the restoration of the 5% in this case. So for all of those reasons, we're suggesting the 5% should be restored, and with the rent that we've applied, admittedly more akin to a, obviously a very unique asset and as close or as comparable to a storage type rent as a retail rent, but again having reference to the other rents being paid by the Bay in the city, then we're suggesting the value should be $7,052,000. Thank you.
Does that conclude your presentation?
Oh, and I have rebuttal. You know what? What I'm going to do, Mr. Chairman, if I could ask the board and Ms. Tenuera to pull up the rebuttal submission.
The board doesn't have the rebuttal submission yet?
Yes, it's in the main folder.
It's in the main folder?
Mhm.
Okay.
I'm kind of messed up here. I don't know where that is now.
Just go back to your folder icon at the bottom and click on it and bring in.
Yeah, this is the main folder. And when you go to that's the applicant.
I got it.
Okay, yeah, we have it.
Wait, okay, thank you. So, and I'm not going to belabor this because Ms. Tenuera was very, very forthright as to the fact that there's really no comparable leases out there for the premise, especially in the physical condition it's in. But I do set out in this document, there's a total of 7 pages of rebuttal. And what I set out is the details of the rental comparables. Yes?
Can you hold on, please? I need to open my rebuttal. I have trouble with my device. Give me 1 second.
Okay,
please.
Certainly.
Okay. Yeah, I'm good now.
Okay,
Thanks,
Ms. Tenuera. So it's, Mr. Chairman, again, I'll just be very brief on these. The lease comparables that were presented by the department, of course, and again, I think we're both agreed that they're not particularly comparable to the subject, but I do detail the leases. The first one is the Manitoba Health Offices at 300 Carleton Street, which had a very, very substantial sum of money spent on the space and resulting in an effective year of 1990. In that case, much superior. The comparable number 2 on the office side is actually a build to suit that was constructed in 2007 and leased to Bell MTS. And again, in our respectful submission, not at all comparable to the subject. The assessor's lease comparable number 3 is the Public Works lease at 167. Again, fully finished office space that is not comparable to the subject. Lease comparable number 4 is the brand new Stantec Consulting offices, again, ages 2015, and it's very high quality office space. Lease comparable number 5 is the City of Winnipeg Assessment Department's lease at 457 Main Street, again, fully finished office space that's not comparable. And then with respect to the retail comparables, There's a couple of Walmarts in there in the major shopping centers. Again, single story, very, very attractive retail space and with respect to these centers and not comparable to the subject. Number 3 is the Brick on St. James Street. Number 4 is the Canadian Tire on St. James Street. And finally, number 5 is the Canadian Tire at Garden City Shopping Center. So these premises, I'd certainly suggest are not at all comparable to the subject. And that's not to fault Ms. Tinawara. There simply isn't anything out there on the retail or office side that would be comparable to this, and especially when one considers the condition as shown in the photographs and in the materials that I've submitted. So we continue to believe that the rental rates that we selected are fair. Thank you. That is my submission.
Okay, Ms. Tinawara, do you have any questions of?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you so much. One question for Mr. Reimer's brief. PDF submission, page number 41 and below. That means the photographs. I'm talking about the last 3 pages of photograph. Those are the spaces we believe the Hudson Bay Company occupied until for the closure. Is that true? I
believe those, it would be for the main floor and second floor. That's what they occupied. Yep.
And also, those are the spaces you have used the $4 per square feet rental rates?
Yes.
Okay. Then the other spaces you use the $3.50 and the basement.
And then the base, let me go back, Ms. Tinawara, hang on a second here. So I've used, $4 for the main and second floor that was formerly occupied by the Bay, like just prior to them leaving. I've used $3.50 for the upper floors, that would be floors 3 to 6, and then $3.43 for the basement space. That's correct.
Okay. And you don't put any basement photos, and that's.
No, there's no basement photos in there.
Yeah,
no.
Sure. No, that's what I believe too. And you use the 25% vacancy rate as the City of Winnipeg. We use the 25% vacancy rate, and that means we both parties sign agreement is fully vacant as of, even though it was occupied at the time we negotiate. It was fully vacant. We use the full condition of vacancy. We both. You agree for that one?
Well, sorry, Ms. Tinawara, there is a bit of a spot in there where you cut out. You cut out a little bit, but I think the question was, did we use the 25% based on 100% vacancy? We've certainly used the 25% now. Yes, you're absolutely right, and I believe we also applied it with the 15-1 when the building still had 170,000 feet out of the 600,000 occupied, but it was still obviously very substantial at that point. But yes, indeed, we've used it both then and now. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Then only the one last question. The leases are, I already, in my presentation, I very openly suggest none of my comparables 100% comparable compared to the Portage, 450 Portage Avenue, Hudson Bay Company property. But only one building is there for 457 Main Street, which is the assessment department building. Do you agree we both has the historical status on the building, even though we pay very high rent?
Well, there's no doubt. I believe, I haven't looked into it, Ms. Tinawara, but I would think that 457 would have the historical designation. But again, the reason I'm suggesting none of those are comparable is because you've got fully finished office with all the HVAC distribution, and it's a functioning office, which is in that appraisal you mentioned. That's where the massive price tag starts to come in when you're doing that kind of work. But I agree, they both have historical designation, so you couldn't
we both have the historical designation. Do you agree if somehow if the Hudson Bay building, if it converted to the office building, is there any opportunity to rent for the higher rental rates?
If it happened. Right. If someone was to come along and spend the $100 million, then perhaps they would get that rental rate. That's the very point, right? So yes, while it's the historical designation wouldn't prevent the development of the interior, but what I'm suggesting, Ms. Tinoera, is it's completely cost prohibitive for anything that's feasible, which is why any of the full finished office space really isn't comparable.
Yeah, no, I honestly very upfront. My comparable.
Yeah.
I just a size factor only,
Yeah.
nothing else. Yeah.
Certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all my questions for you. Questions today.
Thank you. Marla, do you have any questions?
I do not know.
Doug, do you have any questions?
No, I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, well then I have no questions either. So that's, oh, just one question for certainty. The parkade is on a separate roll number.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Good point. Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. That concludes this item. So the next property on the agenda is 424 Portage Avenue. I believe we have a different assessor for that. Can you swear them in? That concludes this item. So the next property on the agenda is 424 Portage Avenue.
You guys hear me okay?
You need to close your YouTube player, please.
Okay, I closed it.
Okay, thank you. Please state your full name,
Roddy Pontanilla?
and you affirm the evidence you're about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you.
So if you guys can just give me a second here, I'm just opening up my files. Okay. So I actually do have a recommendation for this property. I was told that I have to email you guys right now to submit the evidence, I guess.
If you have it, we would appreciate seeing the new numbers if you have
I think that's Porter revision at Winnipeg.ca.
No, just BOR at winnipeg.ca.
Yeah. 424 Portage Avenue. One second, I'm just opening it up now. It's a little interesting doing everything remotely here. This is my first time on this carousel, so to speak, so I have to get myself a little acquainted here. Okay, so I've sent it to you now.
I'm having a bit of an issue here.
He hasn't sent it yet, but sorry, 1 second.
I believe I just sent it now. I'm not sure if it's actually gotten to you guys yet, but maybe let me know when you guys get it.
That 1 moment.
Four 24 Portage? Okay, thank you.
I'm going to just put it into the main folder. And I have to email it to the applicant and our other board member.
Should I start to give my presentation in the meantime, or maybe I'll just wait for you guys to get it still, just to be sure?
We'll wait for them to get it.
Okay, no problem. I'll just wait.
And I have received it now.
Did you need?
I have just received it.
Okay, Mr. Raymond, do you need a minute to look it over?
I think you're gonna need Andrew.
No. No, I'm good to go, Mr. Chairman.
So this is your agenda, and then just go back to the folder. Yeah, in there, and it's the one for recommendation number. At the very bottom.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Ram, how do you feel about this recommendation?
I appreciate it. We're still a bit apart, so I'd prefer to continue, please.
Okay, Mr. Sesser, please continue then.
Okay, so if you just give me a second here to so back in order. Okay, so the file number is file 21-317. The applicant was Altus Group Limited. The roll number is 1209-368-8400. Address is 424 Portage Avenue. The owner is 254-6958 Manitoba Ltd. And the 2022 assessed value went out at $734,000 as a reference date of April 1st, 2018. So we have some of the property descriptions that are listed there. It's one building, 4 premises included. It's a 3-story building. Some of the other details, including the effective age and the actual year of 1930. We have a leasable area of 9,679 square feet on the property. And so if we continue on to the second page, we have a location map image of the parcel itself. So we can see it's kind of nestled in between 2 other parcels facing Portage Avenue on the south side. The following images are some aerial pictometry images, which show the parcel. So you can see one image. The first one is from the back of the unit of the subject property. The second one is in the front. And then we have some Google images, which shows the property itself. So it looks like it has a little bit of a historical sort of a facade on the outside. There's a single tenant on the main floor. And then we just have some more images of the property itself. No subject sale history is on the property. We have no subject leases on the property. The following page I've included of the rent comparables. So you can see we have a variety of different comparables. Some perhaps a little better, some a little worse, but they're all around the retail sort of designation and have the same labels that this property has. I've also included some basement comparables on the following page, which lists some comparables for basements in the neighborhood. Following there, we have the original valuation that was on it. So we had an 08 substandard basement. We had 2,408 square feet on it at $3.54 per square foot.
Since you replaced this, perhaps we need not go over this valuation and just go over your new valuation.
Okay, sure. So that was the original valuation we had there. And then through my recommendations after consultation with Mr. Reimer's brief, it was agreed that the basement would not be included in the valuation anymore, as there was not really any leasable quality to the basement. So I've actually removed the basement from the valuation stream. We've actually increased the main floor leasable area based on some information that was gleaned from Mr. Reimer's brief, which showed the use of the main floor there. So we increased it to the appropriate value. And then we have the second and third floors are on the next valuation at 4,816 square feet. We have increased the vacancy that was previously on it from 17.56 to 20%. We have a 2%, we have shortfall at $6.50, a 2% other expense. And we've the cap rate of 8.65% on that, which gave us a overall market value revised of $706,000. And then from there, we have, so if we just want to skip over, we have a table of our capitalization rates, some information on how we came up with our cap rates. And then we also have some, we have the income and expense mailer that was attached to it on the following few pages. And then we end off that with our addenda information in regards to the removal of the 5% management and then the fresh look on the new assessment this cycle. And that's my presentation.
Okay. Mr. Reimer, do you have any questions?
Just a couple. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And what I'll do is I'll refer to Mr. Pontanilla. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct.
Mr. Pontanilla's revised valuation, please. So, Mr. Pontanilla, we're actually closer, obviously, on a number of points now than we were initially. Now, the rent, I guess specifically, the rent on the second and third floors, that is represented by, in this revised valuation, the 4,816 feet at 1160, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, now, and the rent comparables that you've submitted, I trust and assume that, or I have assumed that all of those rents, and specifically on your page 7, that it's got a number of different ones there, that's all for actually finished office space, correct? Office and retail space?
Them, yeah, they would be from the finished office retail designation.
Okay, the majority of them. Are there any, I guess my question then would be, are there any that are unfinished and require substantial amounts of work to get it to a leasable condition?
I'm not sure. I would guess that I pulled the market data from our system, so I can't speak to the exact nature of the current comps as they were put in at the time, as of the April 1st reference date. But looking back on my comps here now, that the majority of them, they are all in the main floor comps, and they do appear to be with office or retail finishes in place.
Certainly. Okay. And the 5%, and we're all certainly aware that's an ongoing issue, but we can agree that the 5% for quote unquote management, that was applied up until this cycle and then removed this particular cycle, correct?
We can agree on that. Yeah, correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those are my questions.
Okay, Doug, any questions?
No, thank you.
Marla, any questions?
No questions.
I'm just got a question on your comparables.
Sure.
Are they all upper floor rents?
They're all, they're actually, the majority of them are main floor rents. So it was a little bit difficult when I was putting this brief together to find some reliable second floor leases that would be sort of comparable to what I thought for the subject property. So I included them as main floor rents, and then I also included the basement rents, but there's not really anything that would be that could be really leaned upon for a second floor rental rate. So the rental rate that's applied is model driven. Yeah, that's just the valuation we have on it.
Okay, would it be fair to say then that upper floor rents tend to be a little bit lower than main floor rents?
Yeah, that would be fair to say.
Okay, and another question, is there an elevator in this building?
I believe when I was looking at the floor plans that there was some space that was allocated as elevator, but perhaps Mr. Reimer, who's a little more familiar with the property, I haven't done an inspection myself, so I can't speak to it. I believe I might have seen that when I was doing some calculations on some common areas that were on for the space there. But I haven't looked at it myself. That'd be a question for Mr. Reimer.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I can answer that. There is an elevator, but it has not been working for many years. It's
okay, there you go.
But the elevator is physically in the building, yes.
I thought I saw something in the building plans towards an elevator.
Okay, thank you. I have no more questions. Then you can proceed, Mr. Reimer.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. That was a very good question with respect to the elevator, and there's actually a couple of things to frame the discussion around this building. This is another building that, again, has recently in 2020 has been designated on the historical buildings list. Again, very much impacting, similar to physical condition, impacting what can be done with the building. Now, my question of Mr. Pontanilla as to the second and third floor, the reason that I had framed the question the way I did as to whether that was actually his comps, and I'm trusting they are, I would assume they are all finished retail/office uses. It's because the second and floor spaces that you'll see in my brief with the photos requires, again, a whole lot of work. They have been vacant for many, many years. The owner has been attempting to lease the building himself, or lease the 2 floors himself through Kijiji and similar methods, posting ads. He's actually had, with respect to those ads, he's had, I think he said a total of, it was either 14 or 15 prospective tenants come to the building, actually look at the space, and then the interest just dies out from there when they see the physical condition and they see the fact that effectively their space would be a walk-up because, I mentioned this, Mr. Chairman, while the elevator is physically there, the costs to actually repair it and get it back into use have been prohibitive for the owner, and of course no reason for the owner to do it, and prohibitive in the context of the rent that he was asking for the tenants in the prospective tenants in the second or third floor to pay. So it's not a very particularly favorable situation. So if I could then, and I'll again go straight to the sort of the crux of the issues and I don't know what the board's page number is. On my brief, it's page 9, and it's the page with the valuation summary at the top with our evaluation. Mr. Chairman, can you let me know when you're on that page?
Yeah, we're on it. It's page 98 of 289 for the board's reference.
Thank you. So actually, and I appreciate Mr. Pontanella's review and suggestion, where actually I mentioned we are closer in a lot of respects than we were. So we're actually using a market rent for the main floor space that's a tick higher than what the department's applied, but we are using $10 rent, not the $11 and change for the second and third floors. And I'm going to ask the board in due course to look at some of the photos relating to that space. These, as I mentioned, the second, and sorry, to be clear, we're also not including the basement area. That is, and I agree with Mr. Pontanella's assessment based on my inspection again recently, it is absolutely unleasable. So our potential rent is $84,280. So we're still about $5,000 lower, and that is due to the lower rent on the second and third floor. We're applying a vacancy allowance of 25% as opposed to 20%. As I mentioned, the second, third floors have been vacant for many, many years, in spite of the owner's attempts to lease it up, and some, at least initial interest, which quickly fades once they've seen the space and the configuration. So we're applying 25%. We're restoring the 5% management unrecoverable expense allowance and applying the same cap rate, and we're coming in at a value of $544,000. So the primary differences relate to a slightly lower overall market rent, slightly higher vacancy allowance, and the inclusion of the 5% allowance. Just on the point with respect to the second and third floors, and again, Mr. Chairman, I'll rely on you for the page number reference. It is roughly starting, let me actually get this, 9. So 8 pages after the valuation summary page, you should have the start of photographs. And so on my page 17, it starts with the main floor space, that's the good quality retail space. So that's where the $15 rent that we've applied is applied to that space. Then you've got the stairwell, which is located that would be just to the east of the space itself, going to the second floor. And then on the upper floors, starts on, my page 18. These are the photos of the second and third floors. And as you can see that without some degree of work, it's not particularly attractive space, and further work would need to be done in order to make it viable for most, I would say retail, but it would really be office or possibly art space kind of uses. So in lieu, or in and then I have on the last couple of pages the basement area, which again we've removed as the assessor has, so there's no need to dwell on that. So based on the physical condition relative to the comparables that have been submitted, I suggest the $10 rate is appropriate. It results in a slightly lower overall rent and the final value of $544,000. And Mr. Chairman, if I could ask the board members to carry forward my previous comments on the non-recoverable expense evidence, and that would be my submission. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Assessor?
No, I had some inquiry with Kerry in regards to the vacancy of the building, as I would agree with him that we, on our records, also have maybe several decades of chronic vacancy on the building. So I did have a little bit of inquiry regarding that, but he satisfied my my need to find that out. So I have no questions.
Okay, let me just ask you then, does that mean you're accepting the 25% vacancy rate, or you're still defending 20%?
No, I'll defend 20%. When we use 25% with the department, our 25% vacancy is only used for buildings that are 100% vacant. So if a building is 100% vacant, then we can apply a 25% vacancy on it to to offset the fact that the building is suffering from some chronic vacancy. In this scenario, because the main floor is still being used in a retail setting and has been for quite some time, I'm comfortable with the 20% vacancy being put on the valuation stream.
Okay, thank you. Doug, do you have any questions of the agents?
Yeah, just one. Any idea what the cost would be to get that elevator operational again?
The quick answer is no. What I've been told, quote unquote, is that it's cost prohibitive, even with the assumption that the second floor would be leased out at a rate the owner wanted. If both floors were leased out, then I imagine they would, but I don't have the dollars and cents on it. I think actually it's been quite a number of years since he's even asked about it because of the chronic vacancy.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Marlene, any questions of the...
Just one. When you say chronic vacancy, how many years are you are you talking months? Are you talking years?
It's actually over, to my knowledge, and I've known this property for a while, it's been at least 12 years. 12 years of...
floors?
Yeah, 67% vacancy over 12 years. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
Those are all my questions.
Okay, that concludes then this property. I suggest we take a 10-minute break till 10:15 and then come back for the item 4 on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll call us back to order. The next property on the agenda today is 507 Ellis. So you can, I understand you have a recommendation here, Mr. Assessor?
I do have a recommendation.
You can proceed on the property.
Okay, so maybe I'll just start off with the initials just to get it out of the way. So the file number is 21280. The applicant is Altus. The roll number is 1305-148-5000. Address is 507 Ellis Avenue. We have the 2022 the 2022 assessed value went out at $319,000. And if you guys wanted to take the time to open up your rec form that I provided you.
Yeah.
Are you ready? You have it in front of you guys there?
For the board's sake, Bellin has now included the recommendations in the package for us.
Okay, but you guys have because I sent it to the board earlier. You have it? Okay. So we had a adjustment on, so if you open it up and you can see that we had an adjustment done to the rental rate for the subject property. And then we included, we also increased the cap rate to 8%. And then both of those adjustments gave us a value for the for this property of $83,000. And because it is there's two streams on this valuation. There's the retail side of the stream, and then there's a parking stream. If you add the parking stream of $199,000, that's a total revised recommendation of $282,000.
Okay, and how do you feel about that recommendation, Mr. Rimmer?
We come in at a different method, but we get to the same value, so we agree with the total value of $282,000.
Okay.
Perfect.
Any questions from the board on this, Doug?
None for me, thank you.
Marla?
None for me.
All right, short and sweet then. Now we come to 191 Main Street. And you have a recommendation in your package to reduce to $505,386,000.
Yes, that's correct.
And how do you feel about that recommendation, Mr. Rimmer?
I'd prefer to proceed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You can proceed then, Mr. Adjuster.
Okay. So the file number is 21-341. Once again, it's Altus as the applicant. Roll number is 1209-774-2200. The address is 191 Main Street. We have a 2022 assessed value that originally went out at $5,452,000, which I had then given a revision to $5,386,000. So if you look at the property, this property is a standalone, I guess it would be a restaurant, more of an upscale restaurant, but it's a standalone building. So if we follow on to the next page, you'll see my initial image showing the subject property, the parcel that it takes up there. And so it looks to be right on the corner of York Avenue and Main Street. And then following that, we have some pictometry imagery, which shows the subject property from overhead. So we can see the building itself is on the south end of the parcel. And then we have on the north end of the parcel is a rather large piece of land that's being used as currently as a parking space for parking stalls. And then if we proceed forward, we also have some more pictometry images which show the subject property. Following that is some Google Street View imagery, which shows the subject property as to the nature of how it's being used. And then one of the images there as well, we can see the excess land that's there and the in-park designation that's on the side there, showing that they are using it as a parking area. The following imagery from there we have is the excess land calculation that we did do on the subject property. So you can see that it's highlighted there. We don't have any recent sales history on it. There's no subject property leases on the property itself. My comparables I've included are all very much used in the same manner as the subject property. And you can see the rental rates that range in my comparables there. I've included some land comparable sales to show some land sales of vacant land that was recently somewhat within the market in the market region there. And then through this market data was how I came up with my excess land value calculation, which I've included in the bottom there, which shows the 24,000 square feet, which is the excess land at $85 a square foot to give us a revised value there of $2,040,000. So on the income stream, we have we have two premises on there, one for 7,501 square feet, one for 7,501 square feet at $32.68 a square foot. And then the following premise is 999 square feet at $20.87 a square foot. We've included the model parameters on there. But then of course I have the revised value showing the $5,386,000. The following there is just a summary of the income valuation, and then we proceed with the capitalization rate study that we include, just showing how we come up with our cap rates, some municipal assessment excerpts, and then we have the latest income and expense mailer included for the subject property, and then we finish off our brief with an addenda on the 5% non-recoverable expense information. And that's my presentation.
Okay, let me just catch up. Okay, questions, Mr. Raymond?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Pontanillo, we can agree that our valuation date called the reference date for this assessment and the ones on the docket this morning, it's April 1st, 2018, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Can we, and again, Mr. Chairman, I'm referring to the assessor's PDF and the page number on the PDF. Mr. Pontanillo, if we could go to page 7 of your brief, which lists the least comparables that the department's presented.
Sure.
So I've calculated it, and feel free if you want to, but I've calculated the simple average of all of these least comparables as $27.76. Again, if you want to calculate it, go ahead. But if you trust me, then we can agree that that's what the average would be.
If that's how you calculate it out to be, it seems that it wouldn't be out of the question there based on the rent rates.
And to be clear, it's a simple average, not the weighted average.
Sure.
Okay, so we've got an average of 2776, and with the reference date, the third lease at January 1st of 18 at 2786, that would be the lease closest to the reference date, correct?
Sorry, can you rephrase the question? I was just kind of following along there with my comps.
Yep, no problem. The third comp is the lease start date is January 1st, 2018, and that's the lease that's okay.
Yeah, I see what you're referring to there. Yeah.
Okay. Now, with respect to on the following page, I show it as page 8. With the land sales, did you have a chance, and I'm guessing perhaps not, but did you have a chance to look into any of the circumstances with these land sales to determine either what's been done with them or if they were motivated sales?
I have not, no. This is just data that I pulled from what we had on hand in regards to comparable sales.
You bet. Fair enough. Then going to your page 9, so that would be 2 pages down. And I think we can agree, in fact, I know we can agree, the 999 square feet, that's the mezzanine space, correct?
That would be the mezzanine, correct?
Yep. Okay, and the remainder of the parameters, or perhaps all of them, including the rental rates, these are all, at the end of the day, these are all model driven?
They're all model driven, correct.
Mr. Chairman, those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Marla, any questions of the assessor?
No questions this time.
Okay, Doug, any questions?
None for me, thank you.
All right, then you can proceed, Mr. Reimer.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And again, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to sort of lean on you to provide your page number, but on my page 9 of my brief, there's a page entitled Valuation Summary. If I could ask the board members and Mr. Pontanilla to go to that page.
Yep.
Okay, it is our page 200.
Thank you. So actually, while we're getting to that page, I'll summarize that, at the end of the day, there is some difference in our respective valuations. Predictably, the non-recoverable expense allowance of 5% is one of them. We're actually not too far off, but we still are a little different on the potential rent. I've applied, as you can see on the valuation summary, I've applied $31 to the main floor area and then a half rate for the mezz. So I come in at a total rent of $248,000. That's about $17,000 lower. I'm certainly suggesting, Mr. Chairman, that the $31 rate is borne out not just by our own evidence, which I'll talk to in just a minute, but also the department's evidence with the average rate actually and I agree, I know the comps that Mr. Pontantilla submitted, I'm familiar with them, and so I would agree those are very comparable situations, but the average is even less still than my $31 rate. So I should suggest that the $31 rate's very fair. I'm using a 4% vacancy allowance rather than 3%. The department's applied 3%. I just, quite bluntly, I just don't believe that 3% is high enough for the restaurant type of use. If one looks at, even what's happened in Winnipeg over the last, 10, 15, 20 years, and you look at the closures of things like Red Lobster and Perkins and the Pizza Huts and such, it's just, and then before that, things like Bonanza used to be one of my favorite restaurants. They ended up shutting down many years ago. And so these things, I'd suggest just with a 4% rate, that's the lowest I would suggest that an investor would value a restaurant type use. So I've applied the 4%. Again, we've applied the 5% for the non-recoverables as shown there. Interestingly enough, we're applying a lower cap rate. We've applied 7.25. And again, Mr. Chairman, you've heard this from me before. That presumes the application of the 5% non-recoverable allowance. If one removes the 5% non-recoverable, that of course our cap rate study is based on parameters that include the 5%. Mathematically, if you remove the 5% from our cap rate analysis, it has the effect of bumping the cap by between 35 and 40 basis points. So actually, when you look at this, we've applied 7.25. If the board, for any reason, were inclined to take out the 5%, my revised suggestion for cap rate would be closer to 7.55%. That's within a stone's throw of what Mr. Pontanilla has submitted at 7.5%. So we're fairly close that way. And then the excess land, we're agreeing with the amount, the land area, I should say, at 24,000. But we certainly are applying a lower rate at $60 a square foot. That results in an excess land adjustment of $1,440,000. So our suggestion this morning is to reduce the assessment to $4,459,000. I'm going to ask the board now from that valuation page to go up, I say up to the previous 2 pages. And at the top of the second page that's previous to the valuation is the comparable rents that we're supplying to the board as evidence this morning. Our rental range is actually a wee bit tighter than that supplied by the department, but very consistent. We've got rents for, and these again are very comparable premises that are applied for restaurant spaces. It's things like Joey's. It's actually, there's an Earl's in there, Original Joe's, Montana's, and Moxie's. So it's all very similar kind of flavors, restaurant flavors to the subject. And based on that, we've got a rental range of between $30 and $31, and we've applied $31 in this case. I'd ask the board to carry forward our previous comments concerning the 5% non-recoverable expense, please. And in the alternative, if the 5% is not included, then our request, of course, would be amended on cap rate to 7.5, consistent with the department's approach. Now, the excess land is actually the single biggest difference in our valuation. So if I could ask the board members and Mr. Pontanilla to go forward one page further into the brief, there is at the top, it says capitalization rate, which I've just talked about, and then the excess land valuation. So we have applied an excess land rate of $60 a square foot, and it's based upon the sales that you see there, ranging from 2013 all the way up to 2017. There's a sale on St. Mary Avenue. The sale on William Stevenson is just right in the vicinity of the subject, just a little further, just off Portage, or sorry, just off Main Street on William Stevenson. Again, Pioneer is just off Main Street, very, very close to the subject. And then we've got another sale on Gary Street at 59 a square foot. 219 Main is actually the parcel of land that's right beside, right adjacent to the subject, just to the north of the subject property. And that traded in 2014 for $54.91 a foot. And then we've got a sale on Colony. So certainly in terms of comparability, 219 Main is very comparable, and Stevenson and Pioneer being in the William Stevenson and Pioneer being in the very close vicinity of the subject at $62 and $64 respectively, we believe are very supportive of the value of $60 that we're suggesting this morning. So based upon the $60 rate for the excess land value, that results in a total adjustment of $1,440,000. And then again, moving one page further into the brief on my page 9, pardon me, that then results with all of those adjustments to the parameters. It results in a final value of $4,459,000. And that's our request this morning. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Sessa, do you have questions of the applicants?
No, it's seems pretty straightforward on his end, so we might want to leave it to just a difference of opinion, but I have no questions for him.
Okay, Doug, do you have questions?
No questions for me, thank you much.
And Marla, any questions?
No questions.
Okay, I just got one on your vacancy rate. So it seems like it's just an estimate of a vacancy rate and not based on any parameters. Do you have any background information?
Any detailed studies? No, you're exactly right, Mr. Chairman. You framed that exactly right. I have no detailed restaurant studies. I just looked at I thought of the examples that I just listed, and the frequency with which they do close, and I'd suggest the 3%. And the 3% is too low in my opinion, but you're right. No, there's nothing I can show you objectively saying, here's a quantification of the 4%. You are right.
Okay, thank you very much on that. I have no more questions then on this property, so thank you very much for that. All right, we will go on to this next property, which is 2169 Portage. Let me just does the assessor have the recommendation on this one? For $1,148,000?
Yes, that's correct. 1,148,000.
Okay, can you begin on this one, Mr. Assessor, then?
Sure. Okay, so the file number for this one is 21-319. Altus again is the applicant. Roll number is 0705-008-8000. The address is 2169 Portage Avenue. The roll number, the roll year for the assessed value that went out in the 2022 roll year is $1,445,000. And we do have a recommendation to offer based on some adjustments, which you can see in front of you on the rental rates. We adjusted the vacancy rate, and we adjusted the shortfall, and we adjusted the cap rate. And after all the adjustments that we made on the property, we came up with a new value of $1,148,000.
And Mr. Ram, how do you feel about that valuation?
Again, we come there by a different route, but we agree with the final value.
All right. Any questions from the board on this? Hearing none, I shall turn my page and move on to the next property. Our last property on the agenda is 1212 Nairn. Okay, you can begin, Mr. Assessor.
Okay, so the file number for this is 21-308. The applicant is Altus again. Roll number is 1410-004-3400. The address is 1212 Nairn Avenue. The assessed value for the 2022 assessment year went out at $2,915,000. So for the property description, it's a one premise, one building, one story standalone building. The actual year built is 2007. We have a leasable area of 7,034 square feet. And if you proceed along to the next page, I have included the picture of the parcel. So we can see that the parcel is sitting on the corner of Nairn Avenue and Panet Road. Following there, we have some pictometry images to show the property itself, where it's situated in regards to the parcel. So we have one overhead image and then one image of the building face on, I guess from the looking north from the south side, I believe. From there, we have some Google Street View images on there that just show the subject parcel itself, or the subject property, sorry. So we have no sales history on the subject property. We did have a lease that was on there at the time of the reference date. So you can see there, the lease started January 1st, 2018. It was a 2-year lease, and the rental rate was $27.86 per square feet. I've included some rent comparables of all buildings that are similar in use to the subject property. So we can see a range of market data there. And then when we get into the valuation, we have one premise on the valuation stream of the subject at 7,034 square feet at $32.28 a square foot. This is all model driven, so we have all the same model parameters on there: 3% vacancy, 2% expense, $7.50 for shortfall, and we've provided a 7.35% cap rate that we've applied, which gives us the assessment value of $2,915,000. The following page from there shows the income value summary, and then we have the capitalization rate chart showing how we came up with our cap rates. So Municipal Assessment Act excerpts, and then we've included the income and expense mailer for the subject property, and then we have included the schedule of tenants, and then we've also included a Board of Revision order. This order was for the 2020 assessment year, I believe. And it was for this property, and it was just to show the confirmation of value that was confirmed onto the property. And so I'm looking for the same as just confirmation on the property itself of the assessed value. And then we finish off with our addenda, just showing our information in regards to the removal of the 5% management expense. And that's my presentation.
Questions, Mr. Reimer?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And again, I'm going to refer to the page numbers in Mr. Pontanella's brief. Mr. Pontanella, can we go to your page 7, which is the valuation of the subject?
Sure.
And so this, if I understood you right, these are all model-driven parameters from top to bottom, including the rent,
Yes,
right
that's
through the
correct.
cap rate. Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so if we go to one page prior to that on what I see as page 6.
Yeah.
So again, we've got the rental comparables, and feel free to calculate if you believe I'm incorrect, but I'm going to suggest to you the simple average of these comps is 31.25. Do you think that makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Now the actual, and you allude to it in the page prior to that, January 1st of 18, just 3 months prior to the valuation date, this property was leased to the tenant at $27.86 a square foot, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, I'm not going to bother going to the page number, but the Board of Revision order, understand fully that you've put the Board of Revision order in. That was with, Altus was not representing the owner in that appeal, correct?
From as far as I can see, that's correct.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Those are my questions.
Okay, Marla, any questions?
No questions.
Okay, Doug, any questions?
No questions for me, thank you.
All right, so then you can proceed, Mr. Reimer.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So I'd like to preface my comments as I had with the Hudson Bay appeal, suggest that using the principles in motor coach, certainly I'm not aware of what the other agent, it was not Altus that was involved with the 2020 appeal. And I can give some context for that the 2020 appeal was conducted by another agent on behalf of the tenant liable for taxes at that time. That situation is no longer in play, and the owner certainly has an interest in conducting this appeal directly through Altus. So that's the context in which we are coming here to the board this morning. And for the reasons set forth in motor coach, we're suggesting that based on the evidence you'll hear from us this morning, that it would be appropriate to make an adjustment to the assessment in this case. So, Mr. Chairman, if I could ask you for your page number reference. In my brief, it's page 8, and it's the valuation summary for the subject.
Page 279.
Thank you. So there's the issues are actually reasonably narrow again here. We have used a slightly lower market rent. We've used a $31 rate, and for the board's reference in the previous page is a chart, and this chart is actually the very same rents as we had suggested the board have reference to with respect to 191 Main Street. Again, it's showing an average of $30.45 a foot, a median of 30.25, and that's extremely consistent with the assessor's comparables at 31.25 a square foot. First and foremost, however, what I'd like to point out is our valuation at $218,054. That is virtually identical to the rent being achieved for this space based on the January 2018 renewal, plus a measure of percentage rent that was paid. When those two income sources are added together, and now, Mr. Chairman, this is my wherever your page number is, it's the second last page of my submission. I'm not sure what page number that would be for your documents. It's got at the top, it says Eastgate Center Schedule of Tenants, 1212 Nairn Avenue.
And then just Eastgate Center. Okay, that's 289.
Thank you. So on that schedule of tenants, you can see that this tenant was had in the habit of, as of the reference date, leasing for only small periods of time. And in 2018, the net rent that was being achieved was 210,000. But then there was also, as you look down there, the percentage rent of 7,296. So taking that 210 plus the 7,000 would bring you at around 217,000, which is just almost identical to our suggested market rate of 218,000. So we're within $500 of it. So between the performance of the property and the rent comparables actually submitted by both parties, we certainly believe the $31 rate is eminently reasonable. For the same reasons I've discussed earlier, Mr. Chairman, we're suggesting the 4% vacancy rate. Granted, no specific restaurant study to justify that. It's based upon my perception of the market and what an investor would consider. The remainder of the parameters, management / non-recoverable expenses being the next most significant difference. And we're suggesting the 5% should be restored, failing which, if the 5% were not included, which of course would impact our cap rate conclusions, then we would suggest a cap rate that's closer to perhaps 7.65 to 7.7, somewhere in that neighborhood. But leaving in the 5%, and then at the 7.35% cap, we come in at the total value of $2,620,000, and that's our request this morning.
Okay, questions, Mr. Assessor?
No questions from me.
Okay, Doug, any questions?
Nothing for me, thank you.
Marla, any questions?
No questions.
I just have one question. The street view photos seem to imply that this was up for lease, so it wasn't at all vacant or anything like that.
As of the reference date, it was not vacant. That situation has now changed completely. But as of the reference date, Tony Ormas was still in there.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for that. All right. So that was the last property on the agenda today. We have heard all the items scheduled, and this hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you, you too. Thank you, Gary.
See you, Roddy.
See you later.